Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And guess what? It's election season. And to start it off, we have with us a candidate for City Councilor at Large, J Mullady. Welcome, John.
Hi, George. We gotta stop meeting this way.
Yeah. So, what do you think of the city? What's the status of the city from your take?
From my take, we've been very lucky, my wife and I, in terms of being able to buy a house, our first house on Corning Street, and then we relocated to Iverson after my second child, Teddy, was born. And we have an incredible neighborhood. There's a lot of young families there. It's a nice mix of people who are retired, young families like us, and then like kind of everybody in between. So we've been very happy with our time here.
So, what do you think of Beverly as a city? Is it attractive? If you were going to sell this as a real estate owner, what would you tell them that, hey, Beverly is, you fill in the blanks?
Sure. Beverly has a lot going on. I would say that it's, one of the things that would draw some people in is we have a great downtown. We have access, to the trains. We're, 128 for the ride into Boston, depending on what time you leave.
Yeah. That's a challenge, yeah.
It can be better than not. But I would say there's a lot of potential as well for the city to continue to grow and continue to try to attract, more residents coming in. I think for some people, they might find themselves in a situation where they're priced out of Beverly. And that's something that, I've heard, people talk about wanting to move here, being unable to, and then finding somewhere else on the North Shore to relocate and raise their family.
Yeah. So basically, what do you think the best feature of Beverly is? Is it just the accessibility to Boston, or?
I think the best feature is the people. I've gotten to be very lucky and gotten to know some people in my neighborhood where we've become incredibly close and forming those types of bonds and connections. My kids are active in, Beverly soccer, Beverly Little League, Kiwanis basketball, and then just having the opportunity to interact with different people in the communities have been absolutely wonderful.
So it's attractive to a family, and at the same time, there's got to be challenges. What do you think the biggest challenge is facing Beverly?
I think it depends on where you are. So, if you take, my street, my neighbor who's retired, he's retired Beverly High School history teacher. I would say his challenges have been trying to stay in his home, try to stay in the city. It's going to be a little bit different than, let's say, the single parent who might live in a different part of the city in terms of affordability, as well as accessibility. So one of the things that I came across in trying to understand, the breakdown of the city is that between 25 and 30% of Beverly residents are spending up to 30% of their income on housing, which puts them, in danger of being possibly, evicted, or you're, a rainy day away from housing insecurity. So how can we try to take care of those residents?
Well, that really comes down to the taxes more than anything else. And other things being equal, that's about it. That at least the city can control. Beyond that, it gets to the state and federal government and all that good stuff. Where would you like to see the city go then?
So we are a community that does not have a first-time home buyers program, which would allow different types of families to move into the city to get some sort of financial aid from the city itself. We also can explore working with our partners in the state to create some sort of rent control. So about 32% of Beverly residents are currently renting. So this would allow, protection for them. And you would have to work with our partners in the state legislature. And something else that I think is worth exploring is this idea of looking at our property taxes and trying to alleviate some of that financial burden for some of our residents, whether they be retired on a fixed income, or you can have a progressive property tax where if your property is assessed at, let's say, $350,000, $450,000 versus a $750,000 home, you can start taxing those lower value properties later on. So instead of paying taxes, let's say on the $450,000 value, they're only end up paying taxes on, let's say, the like $300,000 value.
So you're essentially talking about a progressive real estate tax.
Yes. So they're pioneering that in 2 communities in Western Mass right now, and the results right now are showing that it has been beneficial in allowing some residents to stay in their communities longer. Something else that the city might consider doing is trying to become a property owner itself. So you take, let's say, the old St. Margaret's Elementary School in the Farms. If the city can purchase that, renovate it, and this would open up some housing that it could maybe be attractive to retirees or some seniors, and then you give them a mortgage rate where after the mortgage is paid off, the property is theirs, but in order to live in that unit, they have to agree that once they pass away, that property then absorbs back into the city. So it creates some sort of revenue stream.
So it doesn't add to their estate, but it, yeah. So this is something like the Hong Kong system of people can rent essentially city property, and eventually it becomes theirs. I think it goes one step further. It doesn't have this feature that you're talking about of rolling back into the city. It becomes part of their estate.
Yeah,
So it's a way to get people into somewhat permanent housing with no money down.
It's a program that I heard about from my neighbor who's from Scotland, and in his village they refer to them as granny flats.
Oh.
And his mother lived in that for the last years of her life, and it gives people a sense of dignity with their housing. And I think it would also potentially open up some other properties now for families, single-family homes, or single families to move into.
Yeah, that's the whole idea of, I think, providing housing for the seniors, is that they move out of a big house and then they can sell it or rent it. And this whole system of ADUs is along the same lines of, okay, you can put a piece of real estate on your property and move into it or rent it. So there's a whole bunch of schemes like that going around. I think last year the City Council passed one of the ordinances on the taxes to have a reduced rate for seniors. So it's an area that people are working on. And I guess the other question it comes down to is we've got a big plan. It's been in the works for 10, 15 years now, Bass River. And I guess one of the issues there is, what do we do with that? What would you like to see done in Bass River as opposed to building more condos like Rantoul Street is already?
Yeah, I think that I think for some people they would see the bowler mat and the car wash and see it as something more of like a relic of a bygone time. But there are others who are looking at it and seeing some potential, like you said, for housing. But I know that this has been a talking point, like you said, for a while in terms of creating the possibility of like a river walk around the city.
Yeah.
I do like the idea of the city, whether it be with a combination of CPA funds or tax funds, to develop more of our parks. So, something that, thinking about the world that I'm in right now with all these different types of kids' sports, is that we have a lot of programs in Beverly that are competing for limited field space, which does create some sort of revenue stream for the city. So we own, as a city, the old Camp Paradise, the Girl Scout camp, and, I would like to see, more conversations about trying to develop that further into creating more park space. What leagues will pay to have access to turf, it's pretty high.
Yeah.
And then we have an area where there's a lot of youth programs and club sports that are competing for field space. And in some cases, they're going to other communities and giving their money to them.
Yeah. So what do you think is the biggest challenge ahead for Beverly?
I think the biggest challenge ahead is there are residents right now, so I'll use my family as an example. I'm going to be 42. I know I look great for my age. And I want to make sure that my children, if they want to, could afford to live in the city. So if we plan now for looking at how we can grow in a smart way and develop in a smart way, where we can have children in middle school when they reach an age where they can want and afford to stay here. It's like the saying, like an optimist, plants trees knowing that they're never going to sleep under the shade, and just planning what the long term is going to be for that. While at the same time, not forgetting the fact that we have residents, like I said, there's 25 to 30%. We need to take care of them as well.
Yeah. So we get to the point of, okay, you're going to be city councilor at large.
Hopefully.
Yeah. What can a city councilor at large do to make some of this stuff happen?
So I like this idea of being someone who wants to collaborate and work with other people. I have that experience, I think, on the school committee, where in order for any sort of progress or change to happen, you can't go in it alone. You have to work together. So I would love having the opportunity to work with other members of the city council of addressing some of those issues that I was talking about earlier. I don't believe it's important to come in with all these ideas that I'm going to fix X and I'm going to change Y. And if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, that first term, you're really going to be learning the ropes and what the job is. And anybody, I feel like, who tells you otherwise, they don't fully understand or appreciate, how complex the job is. So I think listening to would require me to know and to learn to grow into the job.
Well, one of the things about city councilor at large is you have to get signatures from all the various wards. So you get a large spread of opinions. What are you hearing from what are the different problems the different wards are working on or worrying about?
So in my ward, some of the questions I'm hearing, I live in Ward 4, is this idea that they would love to see a bathroom put in at Kimball Haskell Park, especially during the summer where the Beverly Rec Department has a camp there. In Raleigh side, it's problems about the bridge, concerns about housing as well, traffic problems. Everyone seems to have concerns about that, and then some residents in Ward 5 about the water pollution from Varian. And there are some people that are just, they haven't said they have a problem or a concern, and we're thankful that people are interested in running.
Yeah. So that gets to a situation of, okay, city council's got bunches of things to work on. The budget being the biggest one. And we've had a rather contentious year or so with surprises, I'll put it that way, surprises to the city council on the library, the expenses at the library are jumping, dramatically from 3 million to 18 million. And we've been going back and forth on modifying City Hall. And that's been a number that's varied from 25 million to 18 million to 38 million. And we just bought a parking lot downtown for 7.3 million and a building attached to it. So there's a lot of financial work going on. And at the same time, Beverly is, as you mentioned earlier, pushing the idea of being a very vibrant community with a vibrant downtown. I guess the question is, how does this all fit into one bag? It seems like it's 10 pounds of stuff in the bag. It's only holding 5 pounds.
Yeah.
So where would your priorities be?
I would say if I'm fortunate enough to have that privilege of prioritizing something, I would very much be interested in seeing what's going to happen if the city puts forward the override that was talked about following the strike with the BTA, and how is that override going to play out and impact, our city's finances. There's an old quote from Kurt Vonnegut that everyone likes to build, but nobody wants to maintain. So how do we make sure that we're taking care of, people's houses right now, whether it be, affordable housing units or the public housing units as well, and working with different types of partners. I think, that's a very good question about all these other projects that were happening, and the financial costs. But to be very honest, I don't know how that is going to play out. I think there's a fiscal responsibility that the council has and is obligated to follow.
Yeah, I think city finance manager Brian Ailes, I think he does a marvelous job of keeping track of all the money, where it's going. At the same time, he keeps pointing out that, well, we can afford to borrow, and we can afford to borrow for this, we can afford to borrow for that. And I start to wonder, and maybe you can tell me better, at what point do you become uncomfortable that we owe too much money? And it's something we want to do in the future is going to have to be curtailed because we got to pay off the debt.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you balance this?
Yeah, there are some things that you obviously have to spend money on.
Yeah.
And there are other, let's say, we'll call them dream projects that people want to do. We have not had an override in a very long time here. And I think, for some people, that's a source of pride that we as a city have been able to make do without having to go above 2.5%, which I think if you look at the grand big picture, Prop 2.5 really, killed a lot of programs in different communities, and it really hurt our schools. So I guess it's do you have the courage and the audacity to say, we're going to have to do an override, and this is why. And I firmly believe that if you can explain to residents in a very transparent way, this is where the money's going to go towards, the override has a chance of passing. But now you have to figure out, how are we going to take care of people who are on a fixed income? Mm-hmm. But you can make it possible where the override won't impact them in the language that you can write into it. So if you're earning below less, or if your property value is evaluated this, or you have to show some sort of documentation so you don't have to pay more than 2.5%.
Well, that's one of the fictions that always bothers me, is that I've run the numbers on my real estate taxes, and they've been going up 4.5% a year for the last 10 years. And the hooker is, oh yeah, we reevaluated your house and the assessment just went up. So 2.5% is funny number. But you get down to the real question now of, okay, you're talking about an override that the school committee is probably going to request of the superintendent of the schools, one or the other. And the word has been out since the settlement that that's the possibility. What would it be spent on? Has anybody decided where they're going to put this money, or what they're going to do with it?
Some of the money, and I'm going to apologize because I don't have the exact wording from, I think, the press release, is supposed to go towards covering the increase in the cost for the ratified teacher contract. Mm-hmm. So that's money that they're going to have to spend. Yeah. I would say, if you wanted to be optimistic, that by passing an override, the floor is now higher. So the next year, whatever taxes you're going to be raising, it's going to be more because of the base have been increased. So, the schools have cut programs. A program was cut at the high school for students who are returning from long-term hospitalization. Counseling positions have been cut. And, I just get worried about overall mental health for all of our students. So this would be something where, what can the city council do with that? Well, the school has resource officers. We have very dedicated members of the Beverly Police Department who work with the schools. Is it worth exploring, resource adjustment counselors, city employees that can now fill in that gap because it's been cut, and hopefully, those positions will return, because the long-term cost of not providing for mental health, we're talking about, someone's life, but it has profound impact on their learning as well.
Yeah. So that gets to be something I think that needs a lot better explanation than we're normally getting in that. Take my case. I went to school. There was one teacher in the classroom, and there was an ungraded room for the kids that had problems.
Yep.
And that was it. And you've seen how over the years, class sizes have been coming down. I can remember 40 kids in a class. And went to parochial schools, and they did not have a discipline problem twice. And so there's been a dramatic change in elementary education. And there's also been a dramatic emphasis on every kid's got to go to college.
Yeah.
And trade school got axed way back when. So there's a lot to be hammered at and worked on, and that's something that I don't know where the emphasis needs to be to get something to happen.
Yeah, I think if you look at, the DESI reports on our public schools, I think it's fair to say that there's room for improvement, and that's not by any way, shape, or form a critique on the administration, the teachers, or anybody. And it's just the reality.
Yeah.
So how do we do that? Well, where do we rank in funding per pupil? And it's, to me, in my opinion, it's embarrassingly low. So every kid, to go back to what you said about the class size, studies show the ideal class size for elementary is under 20. Now, that's a goal. It's a target goal. That's a heavy cost.
Yeah.
So you take my daughter. She's in first grade at Hannah. Mary has to work harder for her reading, but she has some attention difficulties, and she has some anxiety issues as well. And her teacher is absolutely incredible. But she has this support system with other adults in the room that allows her to be successful. My son Teddy at the middle school, he has to get pulled out for reading. So in order to meet the needs, and in some cases these needs are, federally mandated based on a student's need, you need to have, more bodies, more adults to provide for them. So I think that's where we saw, not to rehash the strike, but that's where we saw this demand from our education community that we need more funding to better provide for our kids. You don't want to make do, and you want to be successful.
Yeah. So we're getting to the point where it's your turn to make your pitch.
Okay.
Your camera.
Okay. So
you're on.
All right, I'm on. So hello, if you're tuning in, as you can see, public speaking is my strong suit. Jeez, George, I'm bubbling this up. If you're tuning in, thank you very much for taking the time to listen to George's interview with me. My name is J Mullady. Some of you might know me as Teddy's dad, or Jack's dad, or maybe that Little League coach who kind of looked like Ted Lasso on the background. I've been very lucky to be a part of this community since my wife and I first bought our house in 2010. I spent time volunteering in different positions here in Beverly, whether it be with the Beverly Historic Society, Beverly City Planning Board, and probably most recently 6 years on the school committee. During that time, I loved the ability to help and to give back and to listen and to try to provide any sort of support or guidance for my friends and also for my neighbors. I'm from a family who likes to give back. My mom's a nurse. My dad was a New York City firefighter. Service, helping others, it's really what makes me tick. And I would love to have the opportunity to serve on the city council. As of right now, there are 5 people running for 3 positions. My son Teddy was like, "Who's your biggest rival?" I was like, "Ted, there's no rival. There's some really good candidates." So the way I'm telling Teddy, Jack, and Mary, my kids, is Beverly residents, you get an ice cream sundae and you get 3 scoops. And I hope I'm lucky enough to be one of your scoops. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to having more conversations with you as the campaign continues.
Oh, thank you. So I wish you the best of luck.
Appreciate it, George. Thank you.
Your campaign. And when do you have to turn in your papers?
July, end of July.
End of July. So you'll still be going around knocking on doors?
I will, yes.
And again, I guess that's the best way to understand what's going on in the city, what the people think, and what their share of the problems are that they would like to have somebody work on. So I wish you the best of luck.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a wonderful night. Thank you very much.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching this evening. And as I mentioned, if you have some comments, my email address is before the credits and after the credits. And if you have a much stronger statement that you want to take a little longer to express, there's always room for you here at the table. And thank you very much for joining us this evening, and we'll see you next time.